to tie another terrestrial pattern today. This is a fly called the Gypsy King, and I think it was originally tied as a crane fly imitation. I know that it is a fly that is fished often as a popular crane fly imitation. However, here in the Midwest, because we're more of a warm water species fishery, I throw this as just a general terrestrial imitation. For the most part, like a hopper pattern or something like that. I tie them in a bright fluorescent and Chartreuse. I don't know if that really attracts the fish much better. I think it's more the silhouette that does it. But it is a fun pattern to tie, and it is a fun fly to fish as well as being productive. So that is the Gypsy King, and I'll get started tying. I'm going to start the Gypsy King by placing my hook in the vise. I'm using a Mustad R74 in a size 8. You could tie this on a shorter shanked hook like an R73, which is like a 2x long or 3x long if you want. You could go even on something a little bit shorter. I've seen some where it's tied on more of a curved caddis hook. It's up to you. You just want to keep your foam and everything else proportionate. I'll go ahead and debarb the hook. For thread, I'm using a UTC 140 Denier in a fluorescent Chartreuse. That's mostly because of the foam that I'm choosing for this, which is a yellow and Chartreuse. Attach the thread about an eye length behind the eye of the hook, and I'm going to run it down the length of the hook to just past the point. Now here I'm going to tie in some wire. I'm using a medium fine gold wire from Danville, and this is going to just reinforce the Peacock Herl body. You don't have to use Peacock Herl for the body. I've seen this tied with chenille. I've seen it tied with various dubbings. It's up to you. I'm sticking with the Peacock Herl because I like the look of it. And I'm just using some strung Peacock Herl. I'm going to select probably 7 or 8 strands. I don't quite need that much. It's just going to be a little bulkier if you use more. The tip's fairly even there, and then trim those so that they're nice and even. Attach those back at the end of the body, wrapping down just a little bit to complete the end of the body, and then wrapping forward. Now, there is one caveat with this particular fly. Normally, I would advance my thread back up to about an eye length behind the eye of the hook, and I would wrap the Peacock Herl the full length of that. Because of the fact that I am using 2 pieces of foam here, I have a 2mm yellow and a 2mm Chartreuse that are glued together here. This is much harder to pull down and attach and get to that hook shank. What I found is if I try to attach it on top of that Peacock Herl, it just has a very, very hard time getting fixed down real well. So because of that, I'm going to stop a little more than halfway, not quite 2/3, a little more than halfway. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to put in the Peacock Herl in this section. I'm going to affix the body, do everything there, Then I'll reattach and put a little bit more Peacock Herl here before I tie it down right behind the eye of the hook. If you're just using a regular 2mm foam, then I wouldn't do that. Just wrap your Peacock Herl, your dubbing, whatever, all the way up. Then bring it back down a little bit to where you're going to tie the foam in. But that'll be clear in just a second here. Now I'm going to apply the Peacock Herl and then the wire rib counter wrapped to protect the Herl. Herl applied, I'll have my thread again just a little more than halfway down the hook shank. This is where I'm going to attach the foam. I am going to put just half a drop of some super glue right here around this foam and that Herl, just to help that foam just a little bit more to be nice and secured on the body. And again, these are both 2mm close-held foam. If you wanted to use, like, say, a 1mm glued with another 1mm, then it'd be thinner and that would work. I've seen some people tie this with a 3mm foam, one color. It's up to you. These I did stamp out with the same Chernobyl ant pattern, or I should say stamp, that I did from River Road Creations. And then I just used a little CA glue to glue those together. I'm going to set this on top here so that the tail is maybe about a half a shank length behind the bend of the hook. I'm using 140 Denier thread. You could also go to a 210 or a Kevlar, which would allow you to pull down on this foam just a little bit more. Just be careful those first few wraps. If you're not careful, you're going to cut through that foam. So I get a few wraps in there. I've got that nice and secured right in front of the Peacock Herl, and I've got some space right here to add a little bit more Peacock Herl. The next step for the Gypsy King is some Flashaboo, some Krystal Flash. I'm using a Flash Accent by Wapsi. This is a Chartreuse Flash Accent. A lot of people will just use a pearl, but because I'm going with the yellow and Chartreuse look here, I'm going to stick with the Chartreuse. I'm going to lash that down just about 3 strands. It doesn't have to be much, and I'm going to cut that just a little bit beyond the length of the abdomen, the rear portion of the fly. The next step is to tie in some deer hair or elk hair. It's up to you. I'm going to use some deer hair for this. You could also use some Chartreuse deer hair if you want. I'm going with just a regular, conventional, natural deer hair. Understand that the deer hair isn't in here for buoyancy. It's here for profile. You're wanting this, if you've ever seen a crane fly, long legs on these things, long extended body, and large wings on the crane fly. So you're wanting something up here that is going to represent those wings and that profile more than, in this case, help this to float. I've already stacked this. I have a small, very small clump. I don't like to have a lot in the wing here. Matter of fact, that's a little too much. I'm going to take a little bit of that out because, again, I'm just going for the profile. I'm not looking for something that's going to add flotation to it. I'm going to measure that so that the tips are just back to about the tip of the abdomen. And I'm going to cut the rest of that deer hair off. And then I will tie this in right here at the butts like this. This gets all of that tied in nice and tight right at the end, and I don't have a bunch sticking out this way. I have to try and get in and cut away. Next will be some rubber legs. You could use some round rubber legs. I'm using some silicone legs. These are just a Chartreuse and blue flaked silicone legs. I'm going to take 2 of those. I'm going to double those over and then cut those in half. Then 2 will go on one side and 2 will go on the other. Round rubber legs are going to be a little bit stiffer, and you could certainly use those if that's what you have or that's what you prefer. I'll tie 2 on one side, 2 on the other side, and I want these to stick out over the front here. We're probably going to end up, once we get the front anchor down, trimming this back a little bit, and then I will trim the front legs a little bit shorter than the back. Next step is to tie in a grizzly hackle. I'm just using a grizzly saddle here. It's just a real simple fly. It's not a long dry fly saddle, but it has the length on the barbs that I want, and all I really need is about 3 to 4 wraps of this to give me the collar that I'm looking for. I'm going to anchor that down with a few wraps of thread. At this point, I'm going to put some head cement all on those thread wraps and down here, and this is just going to help to hold things together a little bit. I'm going to palmer this hackle in. Oops, pulled it right out there. So we'll re-anchor that. That happens sometimes. Now I'll palmer this hackle in 3 to 4 times. Doesn't have to be a perfect collar. You're just looking for some barbs to stick out underneath this and help to represent legs sticking out from underneath this terrestrial or this insect. I get about 4 wraps in there. I'll pull that a little tight. I want to be careful not to get your legs all caught up in this. And I'll trim away the excess hackle. Got some of them that are trapped forward here. I'm just going to clean those up a little bit. You're going to tie these in a smaller size. This, like I said, is a size 8 hook. If I were tying these in a 10 or something, I'd probably go with more of a traditional dry fly hackle. It would be just a little bit stiffer. So now with that tied in, I'll pull back the legs and the foam and bring my thread right up towards the eye, not quite to the eye. Heating that up just a little bit. These are the bits of Peacock Herl that I had tied in for the body. I just saved those when I trimmed those off. And I don't think you necessarily have to do this if it's cumbersome and you don't want to do this. I think you could get by with just lashing down that foam at this point, and I think the fly would be just fine. I'm going to affix that Peacock Herl in here, bring my thread back up to behind the eye, and I'm going to put in 2 or 3 just wraps of Peacock Herl. Really all I got in is about 2.5. Still keeping my thread just behind the eye of the hook. All that's going to do is just fill that space in a little bit along the hook shank. So with my thread just right behind the eye of the hook, I'm going to fold this foam down. I'm going to get in 2 or 3 wraps and then pull that foam snug. Each wrap kind of pulling on that, making certain I've got that foam snugged right down to the hook shank. I'll put in a 4 or 5 turn whip finish right here on those wraps. Snug that up and I can cut away my thread. So now I'm going to trim this foam. I want this to be just maybe an eye length or so in front of the eye of the hook. So I'm just going to trim that back. I can take my legs here, trim these so they're just a little bit longer than that head. This shortens them up a little bit in the front. You don't have to do that if you want them longer. Then the rear legs, I will trim both of those so that they are just a little bit past the abdomen. I can pluck a few of these barbs out that got kind of wrapped in, just to clean that up a little bit. Like I said, this is a very popular crane fly pattern. I've had good luck with just in a terrestrial season fishing this fly. Put some head cement all along the base of those hackles and those thread wraps and across the ones behind the eye of the hook, and again right there. That's just going to help it for the toothier critters that I fish for with this fly. And that will finish our Gypsy King. Just another fun terrestrial pattern. That time of the year is coming up here, and it is a lot of fun. Get out on the streams when the days are long and hot, the water's a little bit low, and you've got all kinds of bugs flying around. It's really a lot of fun just to throw this out along the bank, along grass beds, along timbers, things like that. And just float this baby on down, and smallmouth love it, panfish love it. If you are in trout circles, I think that you would have great luck with the trout on this. Take a look at some of the other videos and things out there for some other color ideas. This is just a popular one that I like to tie and throw around here. So that's the Gypsy King. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining me at Devise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern If not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.